Every ancient civilization on Earth tells the same story. A flood, a deluge, so catastrophic it erased the world that came before. The Sumerians called it the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Greeks spoke of Deucalion's flood. The Hindus recorded it in the Matsya Purana. The Chinese, the Mayans, the Aboriginal Australians, over 300 cultures, separated by oceans and millennia, all describe the same cataclysm. For centuries we were told these were myths, primitive attempts to explain natural disasters. But what if they weren't myths at all? What if they were memories? In the last 30 years, geologists have uncovered evidence of a global catastrophe that occurred approximately 12,800 years ago. Massive flooding, rapid sea level rise, the extinction of dozens of megafauna species, the collapse of advanced human settlements, and then silence. A dark age that lasted thousands of years. This isn't just ancient history. This is a warning, because the forces that destroyed that world are still active today. And in the next 20 minutes, we're going to examine 10 pieces of evidence that suggest the Great Flood wasn't a bedtime story. It was the single most devastating event in human history, and someone has been working very hard to make sure you never connect the dots. Let's begin. The Scablands of Washington. In 1923, a geologist named J. Harlan Bretz stood at the edge of the Columbia River Gorge and saw something that shouldn't exist. Massive channels carved into solid basalt, gravel bars taller than skyscrapers, potholes the size of football fields. The landscape looked like it had been attacked by a geological blowtorch. Bretz proposed a theory that horrified his colleagues. A catastrophic flood, larger than anything in recorded history, had torn through the Pacific Northwest in a matter of days. He called it the Spokane Flood. The academic establishment called it pseudoscience. For decades, they mocked him. Floods, they insisted, were slow, gradual processes, not sudden apocalyptic events. But Bretz was right. In the 1950s, aerial photography revealed the full scope of the devastation. The channeled Scablands covered 16,000 square miles, an area larger than the entire country of Switzerland. The floodwaters had moved at 65 miles per hour, carrying icebergs the size of office buildings. The volume of water was 10 times the combined flow of every river on Earth today. The source, glacial Lake Missoula, a body of water half the size of Lake Michigan, dammed by ice. When the ice broke, 500 cubic miles of water exploded across the continent. And here's what they don't tell you. This wasn't a one-time event. Geologists have found evidence of at least 40 separate megafloods in the same region. But the Scablands weren't the only place this happened. They were just the first place we were allowed to look. The Black Sea deluge. In 1996, marine geologists Robert Ballard and Walter Pittman made a discovery beneath the Black Sea that would rewrite human history. Using deep-sea sonar, they found something impossible. An ancient coastline, buried 400 feet below the current sea level. And along that coastline, preserved wooden structures, tools, pottery, the remains of human settlements. The dating was extraordinary. Approximately 7,500 years ago, exactly when ancient Mesopotamian texts describe the Great Flood, the Black Sea had been a freshwater lake, surrounded by fertile farming communities. Then something catastrophic happened. The Mediterranean Sea, swollen with glacial meltwater, breached a natural land barrier at the Bosphorus Strait. The result was biblical. Salt water poured into the Black Sea basin at 200 times the flow of Niagara Falls. Every single day, the coastline advanced by half a mile. Entire cities vanished overnight. Thousands of people fled in every direction, carrying with them stories of a flood sent by the gods to punish humanity. Mainstream archaeology accepted this discovery, but only partially. They acknowledged the flood, but insisted it was a regional event, a tragic but natural disaster. What they refuse to discuss is the global pattern, because the Black Sea flood happened at the exact same time as catastrophic flooding events in the Persian Gulf, the Mediterranean, and the North Sea. Same timeline, same cause, same result. But we're told these were all coincidences. Göbekli Tepe and the Lost Civilization. In 1994, a Kurdish shepherd stumbled across a stone jutting from a hillside in southeastern Turkey. Archaeologists excavated the site and uncovered something that should not exist. Göbekli Tepe, a massive temple complex, built with astronomical precision, featuring intricately carved pillars weighing up to 20 tons each. The construction date? 11,600 years ago. That's 6,000 years before Stonehenge. 5,000 years before the pyramids. According to everything we've been taught, humans at this time were supposed to be primitive hunter-gatherers, incapable of organized construction or abstract thought. But here's what makes Göbekli Tepe evidence of the flood. The site was deliberately buried. Around 10,000 years ago, the builders filled the entire complex with debris and soil, preserving it perfectly. Why would an advanced civilization bury their greatest achievement? The carvings tell the story. Pillar 43, known as the Vulture Stone, depicts a cataclysmic event. Astronomical symbols align with a comet impact around 12,800 years ago, animals fleeing in terror. Headless human figures. The message is clear. This is a memorial, a warning. And then, after Göbekli Tepe was buried, the archaeological record goes silent. For 2,000 years, there are no comparable structures, no advanced art, no evidence of organized society. It's as if civilization itself was reset. Mainstream archaeology calls this a mystery, but the builders of Göbekli Tepe knew exactly what was coming, and they buried their knowledge so deep, it took us 12,000 years to find it again. The Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis. In 2007, a team of scientists published a paper that sent shockwaves through the academic world. They had found a layer of sediment, dating to 12,800 years ago, that contained platinum, iridium, nanodiamonds, and spherules, microscopic beads of melted rock. These materials only form under extreme heat and pressure, the kind produced by cosmic impacts. The Younger Dryas Impact Hypothesis proposed that a comet or asteroid fragment struck the North American ice sheet, triggering immediate and catastrophic consequences. The impact vaporized trillions of tons of ice, sending a pulse of meltwater into the Atlantic Ocean. This disrupted ocean currents, plunging the northern hemisphere into a sudden deep freeze. At the same time, the impact ignited wildfires across an entire continent. Soot layers from this period have been found in ice cores from Greenland to Antarctica. The extinction followed swiftly. Woolly mammoths, giant sloths, saber-toothed cats, 35 genera of megafauna vanished within centuries. The Clovis people, North America's earliest known civilization, disappeared from the archaeological record. The evidence was overwhelming, but the response from mainstream science was immediate and hostile. The theory was called speculative. The researchers were marginalized, funding dried up, because accepting the Younger Dryas impact means accepting that human history is not a steady march of progress. It's a story of survival after apocalypse, and it means admitting that the flood myths weren't myths. They were eyewitness accounts. Sunken cities of the ancient world. Off the coast of India, Japan, and the Mediterranean, divers have discovered something extraordinary: submerged cities, lying beneath hundreds of feet of water, built with architectural sophistication that rivals anything from the classical era. The Gulf of Kambat, off the coast of Gujarat, India. In 2001, marine archaeologists using sonar detected geometric structures 5 miles long, buried 120 feet underwater. When they retrieved artifacts, carbon dating returned results of 9,500 years old. Stone tools, pottery, wooden beams, an entire urban center, older than the Indus Valley civilization. Yonaguni, Japan. A massive stepped pyramid, carved from solid bedrock, sits beneath the Pacific Ocean. Geologists argue endlessly about whether it's natural or man-made, but the evidence is undeniable. Tool marks, right-angle cuts, ceremonial platforms. If it's artificial, it was built when sea levels were 300 feet lower, before the end of the last ice age. The pattern is global. Dwarka in India, Pavlopetri in Greece, Etlit Yam off the coast of Israel, Heraklion in Egypt. All of them date to the same period. All of them were submerged by rapid sea level rise between 12,000 and 7,000 years ago. Mainstream archaeology dismisses these as Neolithic fishing villages, primitive settlements caught by gradual sea level rise. But the architecture tells a different story. These were planned cities, and they were drowned in a geological instant. The flood didn't just destroy civilizations, it erased them from history entirely. The global megafauna extinction. 12,800 years ago, the Earth was populated by creatures we can barely imagine. Woolly mammoths roamed the tundra. Giant ground sloths moved through forests in South America. Saber-toothed cats hunted across 3 continents. Glyptodons, Armored mammals, the size of cars, grazed the plains. And then, in what geologists call an evolutionary eye blink, they were gone. Not just one species, not just one region. 35 entire genera vanished from the fossil record within a span of less than 1,000 years. In North America alone, 72% of all large mammal species went extinct. For decades, scientists blamed humans. Overhunting, they said. Early humans wiped out the megafauna with spears and fire. But the timeline doesn't support this. Humans and megafauna coexisted for thousands of years before the extinction event. Why would they suddenly start hunting everything to death at the exact moment the climate collapsed? The real cause is written in the fossils themselves. Mammoths found frozen in Siberia with undigested food still in their stomachs. Evidence of sudden catastrophic death. Mass graves where entire herds were buried together under meters of sediment. These animals didn't die from hunting. They died from drowning, freezing, and starvation triggered by a climate catastrophe so severe it reshaped the biosphere. The Younger Dryas event, the same event that matches every flood myth, the same event that academic institutions insist was just a natural climate fluctuation. But extinctions on this scale don't happen naturally. They require a trigger, and that trigger came from the sky. The memory of Atlantis. Plato wrote about Atlantis in 360 BC. Describing it as an advanced island civilization that sank into the ocean in a single day and night of misfortune. Approximately 11,600 years ago. For 2,000 years, scholars dismissed it as allegory, a moral fable about hubris and divine punishment. But what if Plato was recording oral history? The timeline matches. 11,600 years ago, places Atlantis exactly at the end of the Younger Dryas period. The same time Göbekli Tepe was buried, the same time the megafauna died, the same time global sea levels rose by 400 feet. Plato's description of Atlantis matches the profile of dozens of real Bronze Age and Neolithic civilizations: advanced agriculture, monumental architecture, maritime trade networks. And here's what makes it evidence. Plato wasn't the only one who recorded this story. The Hopi people of North America speak of the Third World, destroyed by flood. The Maori of New Zealand tell of the sinking of Hawaii. The Dogon people of Mali describe a homeland swallowed by water. Indigenous Australians have over 300 distinct flood legends, many of which describe specific coastal locations now underwater. Modern archaeology refuses to investigate these parallels. They call it pseudo-archaeology, fringe theory. But the evidence is geophysical. Sea level rise at the end of the Ice Age submerged 27 million square kilometers of habitable land. That's an area larger than the entire continent of North America. Entire coastlines vanished, and with them any trace of the civilizations that lived there. Atlantis wasn't one city, it was a world, and we're living in the ruins. The flood layers in ancient Mesopotamia. In the 1920s, British archaeologist Leonard Woolley was excavating the ancient Sumerian city of when he found something that stopped him cold. Beneath the ruins of temples and ziggurats, his workers hit a layer of clean water-deposited clay, 11 feet thick. No artifacts, no pottery, no evidence of human habitation, just sterile alluvial silt. Woolley dug deeper. Beneath the clay, he found another city. Older, different pottery styles, different architecture. An entire civilization, buried and forgotten, separated from the world above by a geological scar that could only mean one thing: a catastrophic flood. He wasn't the only one. Excavations at Kish, Shurpak, and Uruk, some of the oldest cities in Mesopotamia, revealed identical flood layers, same depth, same composition, same timeline. Approximately 5,000 years ago, the entire Tigris-Euphrates River Valley was inundated by a flood, so massive it buried cities under meters of mud. This is the flood described in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the flood that became the story of Noah, the flood that every Sumerian king list describes as the event that washed away kingship from heaven. But here's the critical detail: these flood layers don't just appear in Mesopotamia. Similar deposits have been found in the Indus Valley, the Yellow River Basin in China, and along the Nile. The academic consensus is that these were separate, regional floods. Unfortunate coincidences. But the oral histories say otherwise. They describe a global deluge, a punishment, a reset, and the geology is starting to agree with the myths. Rapid sea level rise and meltwater pulse 1b. In the 1980s, geologists studying coral reefs and sediment cores discovered something terrifying. Approximately 11,300 years ago, global sea levels rose by 40 to 50 feet in less than 300 years. This event, known as Meltwater Pulse 1b, was the second fastest sea level rise in the entire geological record. To put that in perspective, if sea levels rose by 50 feet today, every coastal city on Earth would be underwater. New York, London, Tokyo, Shanghai, gone. 2 billion people displaced. The entire global economy collapsed. But Meltwater Pulse 1b wasn't the only one. The first event, Meltwater Pulse 1a, occurred 14,600 years ago and raised sea levels by 50 to 80 feet in less than 500 years. These weren't gradual processes. They were catastrophic flooding events triggered by the sudden collapse of continental ice sheets. What caused the ice to collapse so rapidly? The younger Dryas impact. When the comet fragments struck the Laurentide ice sheet, the thermal shock destabilized trillions of tons of ice. The result was a feedback loop. Melting ice raised sea levels, which warmed the oceans, which melted more ice. The process accelerated until entire coastlines were submerged in decades. Mainstream science acknowledges Meltwater Pulse 1b, but they frame it as a slow, natural process. They don't talk about the human cost. They don't talk about the civilizations that were drowned, and they certainly don't connect it to the flood myths, because doing so would mean admitting that ancient people weren't primitive, they were survivors, and they were trying to warn us. The cover-up by modern institutions. Here's the question no one wants to ask. If the evidence for a global flood 12,000 years ago is this overwhelming, why isn't it taught in schools? Why isn't it the foundation of our understanding of human history? The answer is institutional control. For over a century, the academic establishment has operated on a single paradigm. Civilization began in Mesopotamia around 5,000 years ago. Before that, humans were nomadic hunter-gatherers with no capacity for abstract thought, organized religion, or monumental construction. This timeline supports a comforting narrative of linear progress, but the evidence from Göbekli Tepe, the younger Dryas impact, the sunken cities, and the flood layers destroys that narrative. It suggests that advanced civilizations existed before the flood and were annihilated. Accepting this means rewriting textbooks, defunding entire departments, admitting that indigenous oral histories were more accurate than Western science. In the 1990s, when geologist Robert Shaksha proposed that the Sphinx showed evidence of water erosion dating to 10,000 BC, he was professionally attacked. When Graham Hancock published Fingerprints of the Gods linking flood myths to real geological events, he was labeled a pseudo-scientist. When the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis was published, it was systematically suppressed by journals and grant committees. This isn't about protecting science. It's about protecting careers, protecting reputations, and protecting the idea that we are the pinnacle of human achievement, not the survivors of a lost world. The flood happened. The evidence is undeniable, and the greatest mystery isn't what destroyed that world. It's why we've spent 12,000 years pretending it never existed. 10 pieces of evidence. 10 fragments of a story that was almost erased. The Scablands, the Black Sea, Göbekli Tepe, the Younger Dryas impact, the sunken cities, the extinctions, the memory of Atlantis, the flood layers, the sea level rise, and the cover-up. This wasn't random. It wasn't myth. It was a global catastrophe that reset human civilization and erased almost everything that came before. And the survivors, our ancestors, spent the next 10,000 years trying to warn us. They carved it into stone. They wrote it into scripture. They embedded it into every culture on Earth. But we stopped listening. We called it mythology, superstition, primitive fantasy. The truth is, the Great Flood wasn't the end of the world. It was the end of a world we've only just begun to rediscover, and the forces that destroyed it, cosmic impacts, climate instability, rising seas, are still active today. The question isn't whether it happened. The question is, are we ready for when it happens again?